and in their shoes, in their pots, and in their pews. One frog hopping is a source of delight. Hundreds of frogs keep you awake all night. Where did this mess come from? And what are they going to do about it? Everyone is looking to Pharaoh to solve this problem. He is the great and powerful ruler of Egypt, and he should be able to wield his divine power over these frogs, these ambitious amphibians. But they're beginning to suspect that maybe Pharaoh isn't as powerful as he says he is. If he can't even control something simple like frogs, maybe they need to rethink who's really in charge here. The people might be thinking that. They might be thinking, maybe Pharaoh's not in charge here, but Pharaoh's not there yet. Pharaoh is relying on himself and his own power, and his power is very real. It was symbolized by the panoply of gods and goddesses that they believed to control all aspects of Egyptian life. The goddess of the Nile controlled the river, the lifeblood of the valley. The Pharaoh controlled the priests that consorted with her, so Pharaoh believed he controlled the water. The goddess of birth was symbolized by the frog. Didn't know that, did you? And it was revered in Egypt. Well, Pharaoh controlled the priests that consorted with the frog goddess, so Pharaoh believed that he controlled the fertility of his people. And on down the line, for every god, Pharaoh thought he was in charge. The crops and the harvest, the livestock, their health, their children. Pharaoh controlled everything. He even believed that he controlled light and death and life itself. It didn't matter how much people suffered under this delusion that he had. What mattered to him was securing his own position and his wealth and his power. You know, things aren't that much different today, are they? We still have people in power who are controlling the world's resources and wealth. Heads of corporations and government and elite financial centers are like the pharaohs of our time. They're answerable to no one. And they serve the God of profit. And they commodify every aspect of the earth and people's labor. Moses asks, who am I to go to Pharaoh? Remember he asked that last week when he was at the burning bush? Who am I? What's one person in the face of all this power? What difference could I possibly make? Pharaoh is too big to fail. And I am nothing but one person. It will make absolutely no difference if I act or not. Well, God begs to differ. Because there's nothing that irritates God more than someone who thinks he's God. People or organizations or corporations or governments who control so much and act with impunity, that really gets under God's skin. So God sends Moses and Aaron with this message to Pharaoh. Let my people go so that they can worship the true God. Because you are not God. You only think you are. And if you do not humble yourself before God, there will be dire consequences for you and everyone who suffers under your reign. Pharaoh, of course, responds the way most people in power respond when they're given such a message. They what? They harden their heart. In Hebrew, the word is kavod lev. It means that his heart was made impermeable by his wealth and his power. He made himself dense with his own sense of omnipotence. His heart became insensitive. It could not feel. So God has to break down every illusion of power that he has in order to break through to his heart. He systematically sends these plagues that reveal the impotence of Pharaoh's gods and thus himself. The river turns to blood until Pharaoh promises to let the people go, but then he goes back on his word once the water returns to its state of cleanness. Frogs fill the palace and the homes of all the people, and then they lay dying and stinking in the hot sun, thus demonstrating that Pharaoh really has no power over birth. And on down the line, flies, gnats, boils on the skin, locusts, severe weather events that destroy crops, strange diseases that kill livestock, all the gods turn out to be illusions. And Pharaoh is given multiple chances to humble himself and to recognize that his place is to serve the people, to serve God's creation, not to dominate and use them for his own profit. Sometimes when I see the devastation brought on by a changing climate, I wonder if that same process is happening today. Invasive species, alternating floods and droughts, severe weather events, decimated crops, strange diseases affecting our fish and our livestock and our own bodies. Are there messages in these plagues that we're just not getting? Are we in the United States hardening our hearts to the suffering of those most vulnerable just so we can enjoy the lifestyle of a rich Pharaoh? Are we worshiping gods of illusion? Are we being given opportunities to humble ourselves and recognize that our place is to serve each other and to serve God's creation, not to dominate them for our own profit? Sometimes it can even happen in a congregation, this hardening of hearts. Sometimes things happen in a church that can reveal who we really are, what kind of heart is beating within us. When things go well, we get complacent. We just assume that there aren't going to be any challenges. Things are going along just fine. But then when the challenges do come, we are given the same options as Pharaoh. Soften your heart and give yourself over to God, or harden your heart and withhold yourself from God. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be too hard on Pharaoh, because maybe it wasn't just blind stubbornness that encased his heart against God. Maybe it was good old-fashioned fear. You release those Israelites, you lose your energy source. That's a scary prospect. But there might have been other ways to power their economy other than slavery. Let the Israelites go and worship God, and you'll lose your sovereignty. Who wants to lose that? But maybe there are better ways to relate to people other than dominating them. Let yourself see the suffering of people, and you'll be overcome with shame and guilt. And no one wants to feel that. But maybe that is the way that we truly learn who God is and where God's divine compassion truly resides. So maybe the hardening of hearts today is also driven by good old-fashioned fear. Release fossil fuels and we'll lose our energy source. That's a scary prospect. Or maybe there are other healthier ways to power our economy. let the needs of poorer nations guide our policies, we'll lose our sovereignty. Who wants to lose that? Or maybe there are better ways to relate to our neighbors than trying to dominate them. Allow ourselves to see the suffering of people, and we might be overcome with guilt and grief. That can be paralyzing. So we tell ourselves, better to hold on to what we worked so hard for. Better to tighten the grip on our own power. Better to harden our hearts and dig in our heels with what has always worked before. Here's the thing, the world is already changing. It's already changed. We live in a different time and a different planet than even 10 years ago. That old one has passed away, and when we try to grasp onto it, it only leaves us with clenched fists and clenched hearts. God is already doing a new thing. God has already made a decision that injustice can no longer rule. The enslavement of earth and human beings can no longer fuel our economy. What worked before just isn't working now. And really, it didn't work that well to begin with. Because look what a mess it's gotten us into. Same thing can happen in a church. The church is changing. It's already changed. We live in a different time, in a different congregation than we did even 5 years ago. That old one has passed away. There are new people here. The children are growing up. And if we try to grasp on to what was here 50 years ago, that will only leave us with clenched fists and clenched hearts. God is already doing a new thing. God has already made the decision that the foundation that we are built on isn't working in every part. It's sinking beneath our feet. It needs to be repaired. I'm not just talking about the physical joists beneath the floor, but the spiritual and financial undergirding of the congregation. Something unhealthy has taken hold of the structure underneath the congregation, and it needs to be exposed to the light and cleaned up and rebuilt. It may look okay on the surface, but the cracks are showing. The floor is separating, and there is work to be done. So the question for us is, will we harden our hearts and clench our fists? Or will we fully rely on God? Say it with me. Fully rely on God. Will we soften our hearts and open our hands and give ourselves to the task of supporting this amazing ministry of the church? Will we let go of our excuses and our rationalizing and our self-serving reasons for digging in our heels? You know, it wouldn't be so bad if Pharaoh's decision affected only himself. But what he failed or refused to realize is that his stubbornness just dragged everyone else down with him. And that's the real tragedy, isn't it? When the ones who are in charge, the ones with power, the ones with influence, the ones with the resources, when they decide not to care, not to act, when they decide to harden their hearts or hold back and not respond to God, it is ultimately the children who suffer. We see it in Egypt, when it's the children who suffer the most from those plagues. We see it in our world, where it is the children who suffer the most from environmental degradation. And I've seen it happen in congregations where the adults refuse to care. It doesn't happen here, but I've seen it. They refuse to participate in learning programs with the younger members. They refuse to model generosity. They stop attending worship in protest. They stubbornly refuse to try new things. They appear to support the ministry of the church, but then they complain in secret and scheme below the surface and behind closed doors, and their words and their actions form like mold beneath the foundation of the church, and they harden their hearts, and they may believe that they have every right and reason to do so, but who ends up losing in the long run? The children. But our children do not give up on us. Our children around the world sing for us. And our children are going to sing for us here today. They beckon us to come color with them and listen to Bible stories with them and play silly games with them and submit to silly questions in their interviews for Quizzle. And they trust that we as the adults will take care of what needs to be taken care of so that the foundation of the church, both the physical one and the spiritual one, is cleaned up and restored and strengthened. The children of earth have not given up on us. They look to us to leave them a world with clean water and air and animals with enough room to live and grow and thrive. They trust us to take care of the foundation of our economy and energy and health and education and food systems so that they are cleaned up and restored. Our children fully rely on God. Let's show them how wonderful and loving and generous and compassionate and powerful our God really is. Amen.